everybody, happy Halloween. It's October. Thank you for joining me in my studio. I'm Kristi Thornbury. Today I'm really happy to bring you this Halloween theme painting. It is really easy, let me tell you. You can do this with your kids, with friends or family. I hope you enjoy this painting, and if you do, please check out the other art lessons that I have on patreon.com/Kristi. The supplies you need for today's project are a small 25 by 25 centimeter canvas or something similar size, 2 brushes, a small round pointed tip brush, and a little larger, about 3/4 inch fluffy flat brush. I've got a dish of water, and on my paper plate here I have black, white, red, blue, yellow acrylic paints, and a paper towel. If you have your supplies already at home, let's start painting together. First we'll paint the sky, and then after that's dry, then we'll paint the purple hill in the back and then the black foreground with the tree. So let's begin with a wet brush. So I've got my big brush here, fluffy flat brush, and I'm wetting it by putting it all the way down to the bottom of the water dish, tapping it down in the bottom of the dish a few times to make sure the bristles are fully saturated, and tap it on the edge to get rid of any drips. And then I'll just touch it once, flip it over again on the paper towel just to make sure that the brush is damp but not dripping. So here with my paints, I am going to start with a white circle here, as you can see in the top left quadrant of the canvas. And I just jumped right in there. Lots of paint on the brush, and start making circles. So my brush stroke here is just going in a circular motion, not back and forth or up and down, just making circles. And if I use up all the paint, then I just go back and get some more, and I just keep making circles, a white circle. It may be hard to see, of course, because it's just a white circle on a white canvas. However, it's now about the size of a grapefruit. So just make sure you get enough paint on there that it's completely covering the canvas. You don't see any canvas texture through your paint, and it's about the size of a big grapefruit. Now I'm going to add a little bit of yellow on my brush. I'm going to dip it in the water one more time, and tap it a couple times to make sure that it is damp but not dripping. And I'm going to use a little bit more white again, and just a speck of yellow to start with. You see how much yellow I've got on there? Just a tiny corner of the brush is yellow. And I'm not going to go in the middle of my white circle because, as you can see here, I want to leave the center white. So I'm just going to go touch, 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 touch around here, and that way I can distribute the yellow evenly once I start going around in circles here, and I'm working my way outward, not inward. There, now that I've really got all the paint off my brush, I can go back in and just distribute that yellow around the sort of the center there. There we go. Okay, so I might do that again with a little more yellow to kind of increase the dramatic effect, distributing the yellow paint evenly around my glowing moon, and then start to make the circles. All right. Now, we're going to start changing this to green. So my blue is very, very intense, so I don't need very much blue. Notice I just took a tiny bit of blue on my brush, and that was probably more than I needed over there. So I moved a little bit of blue over here, and I'll mix it with yellow to make green. There we go. And yeah, that's pretty good. About a medium green, maybe like a lime green to start with, because as you can see, it starts with more of a yellow green here near the center, and then as you go out, as you work your way outward, then it becomes more and more and more green. But here toward the center, it's a bit more yellow. So I'm just going to go a little bit conservative to begin with my green. Don't want to add too much at once. Again, distribute it evenly around the circle. You can even make a few more dots to make it even, and then start making your swirls around, working your way out, not in, because you don't really want to add green to the very center there, and just work that around. So blending, white is a really good blender. So I just dipped my brush in the water again, just because it was getting a bit sticky, a bit dry, and add some white. And working around, I can use white to blend the green and the yellow. Notice my brush stroke is always circular. I'm always working in with a circular brush stroke to really exaggerate that glowing moon effect. And I keep adding yellow and blue, move that over a bit, to make my green glowing spooky sky. Now I want to mention here that you should paint your edges as you go, not later, because then it's difficult to color match once you're already done and you go back and you want to paint your edges. It's best to do it while you have the right color on your brush. And it's nice to have your edges painted because then you have a choice later about whether or not to frame your work. You can just place it on the bookshelf or hang it on the wall. It doesn't have to be framed. It looks good just as it is. When the edges are painted, it looks nice and professional and finished all the way around. Add a little bit more white. If you find that your transition from white to yellow to green is very obvious, as in you have like a white circle and then you have a yellow donut and then you have a green circle around, like if you can really see the lines where the colors change, then white is your friend. White is your blender. So take a little bit of white and go right around the spot where your color changes, maybe from yellow to green. And then you can blend that area out and make the transition more smooth and more a natural transition from white to yellow to green, instead of just like all of a sudden you have this green circle. Okay, so I'm going to decide if I want to add some more streaks of yellow in here or any other thing, just to really exaggerate the spooky sky. It looks okay, so I'm going to keep working my way out, and as I work my way out, that means I get more and more green. So I'm going to mix a bit more green here, and now I'm going to distribute it around my circle before I start with my circular brush stroke. And my brush is getting a little bit dry. I can tell because I can see the canvas texture through my brush strokes, and the paint is a little bit sticky. It's not flowing very well. So that means I need to dip in the water. Always circular brush stroke. Keep that circle going. It's a nice tight circle in the middle, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you work your way out. So I need to mix a bit more green here to get all the way out to the other edges. Actually, this corner is going to be covered up anyway, as you can see from the finished piece. But it's okay. It's okay to paint it. It may be easier just to kind of continue this flow. And then when this dries, then we're going to paint the rest over top. I'm going to leave that corner because I know that's going to be covered in black. Just going to add a little bit more green in here. It's fun to keep going, and it's just, once you get the hang of this, it is kind of fun to just keep making these brush strokes. Though, one of the hardest things in painting is knowing when to stop. I always tell people, yeah, it's really simple to put paint on canvas, but knowing when to stop, that's actually the hard part. So I got to tell myself now, it's time to stop. My sky is fine, got lots of streaks in there, and the transition from white to yellow to green is pretty smooth, but I do like having a lot of streaks in there just to add some interest in the sky. But I have to let this dry now so that I can do step 2. And I'm back. I have clean water. My brush is clean. It's damp, but not dripping. And we're ready to make the hill in the background that is purple over here. So notice we don't have purple on the palette. We're going to make purple with a little bit of blue and some red. I'm just going to start out with a little bit until I get the color I want. Mix that around just with the tips of the bristles. You don't have to press the brush into the plate and smear the paint all over the palette. Then you'll end up with a plate full of color and nothing left to paint with. So I just dipped my brush. I just needed a little more water. And I'm going to add white to this because it's a pale purple, right? So I'm going to use quite a bit of white. Once I get the shade of purple that I like, I'm going to add white. And it's going to give me like this pale grayish purple. That's just because of the particular blue that I have and the red that I have. You might get a different shade of purple depending if your red and blue are different than mine. That's totally okay. We're just going for some kind of like pale, I'm just making sure that I mix enough paint. We're going for some pale purpley color. So if you mix red and blue and white, you will get something that we can use. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now I have smeared my paint into the plate here because I wanted to make sure that my brush was the paint in the brush was evenly mixed. I don't have any like blobs of blue hiding in the brush bristles. That when I paint on here, I have this big blue streak or something like that. I may add, I think it's a little too dark. A little white there. That's more what I'm going for. Okay. Now try to bring it all back. Try to bring it all back into my little puddle of paint here. And I wiggle the brush like that to try and mix the paint that's in the brush. I'm just trying to make sure that it's completely mixed. Okay, I think I'm ready to paint now. Here we go. So we've got a little hill that goes up like that and down. So I'm just going to try and mimic that shape here. I'm just going to start here on the edge. It's about, what's that, like 2 inches from the bottom. And I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go down. And that's it. I don't need to go all the way over here because that's going to be covered with black. So let me just fill that in. There. Now I can use my big brush for this part, or I can use my smaller brush, whatever one I feel comfortable with. I'm going to try here with my big brush, just making a gravestone. So I'm going to take my brush sideways, this particular brush, I'm going to take it sideways, and just make I'm just going to press it down right here, and drag it down, and lift it up. And then I have a gravestone. See how easy that is? So let me just do that again. I'm going to wiggle my brush in the paint, both sides, make sure it's fully saturated, filled, and the color is right in the brush. Then I'm going to place the brush down sideways. Another one right here, a little smaller one because it's farther away. And drag it down, and then smooth out the ground again. And then I'll do a bigger one on top right here. If you don't have the same kind of brush that I'm using, you can just use your small brush, this little one, and you can just draw a little gravestone, just a little lump like that. That's all it is. Definitely it doesn't need to be perfect. These are supposed to be old, spooky, maybe misshapen, maybe even like partly broken. The more jagged, the better, I guess. There we go. I'm going to leave that to dry for just a little bit because it's quite wet. Hey, I'm back again for the final step. Clean brush, clean water, and we're going to use black now. So this is dry to touch, and I'm going to dip my big brush into the black paint. And I'm really going to dive in there because I am going to put it all around, all along the bottom here. The whole bottom is going to become black. Don't forget the edges. Don't forget to paint the edges as you go, and the bottom edge of your painting as well, of your canvas. So I've gone up about an inch here and just filled it all in black. And now I'm going to start to make the shape of this hill, this kind of landscape, spooky landscape that's here. A little more black on my brush. If you need to dip in the water, if you find that here you see where the paint, you can see the texture of the canvas through the paint, that means that I'm starting to run out of paint there, or I need to add a little bit of water on my brush, which you can do as you're going. If you just need to dip in the water, that's fine. So notice I overlapped my purple hill there. I started the black up top. I'm just trying to copy what I did on the original here. So I've got this sharp angle hill coming down, and then it kind of levels out. Then there's a few bumps. You can make it your landscape however you want. I'll just try and copy the original kind of as closely as I can. Usually when I do these paintings, I try to do them just a little bit different each time, just because it's more fun for me that way. But I'll try to keep it close to the original here. And then it starts to come up where the tree is, and then it gets really jagged. Got all these like bumps sticking out, maybe rocks or roots or something like that. And then I'll make it come up like that. So this top of the hill is not the same as this one. I think I'll keep it down here like this. I like what I've got going here, so I'll just fill this all in. There we go. Now we will finally pick up that small brush. Unless you used your little brush to make these gravestones. We haven't used the little brush yet. So let's finish that off, make sure it's all filled in. There's no canvas showing through. And yep, that looks good. Oh, whoops, not using the small brush yet. I was going to do the tree, but I think I'm going to do these gravestones first, and then I'll do the tree last. That way, when I switch to the small brush, I won't be switching back again after that. So black on the brush. And the gravestones I'm doing with my big brush. So this one actually comes up and overlaps. I just want you to notice that this one comes up above the purple hill. And yours might, or it might not. I'm just going to do mine like that so that it looks the same or similar to the original. I don't want to cover up that one completely, so I'm just going to kind of move it over this way maybe a little bit. And I don't care if it's even. Actually, I probably don't want it to be looking even or exactly straight or anything like that, because it's supposed to be old and broken, remember? So I'll just go up here like this, just widen it a little bit. There. And round at the top. And then I'll do a smaller one here. This one does not come over the over the purple hill. It stays below, so I'll just keep it the same. Trying to make that side over here. There we go, that's better. Okay. Smooth out my brush strokes. And I'm going to add that little bump on the top, a little extra decorative piece of that gravestone, and the little cross on top. I'm going to do that with my small brush. So don't leave this brush, don't lay it down to dry with paint on it. The paint will harden and then your brush will not be useful anymore. Okay, so either drop it in the water and leave it there, or dip it and then put it over to the side wet. Or you could just go clean it off right now. Whatever you like. Just don't leave it there with the paint on it to dry, or your brush will be ruined. So I've got my little brush now. Dip it in the water and tap it on the side. This brush doesn't hold a lot of water, so I'm not really worried about it being too wet because it's so small. So I'm just going to roll it in the black paint. Just roll it. Make sure you're not scrubbing it back and forth like it's a crayon or something, because then you will ruin the tip of this brush. I roll the brush in the paint when I have a pointed tip brush like this because I want to maintain the pointed tip. So if you end up, say you have way too much paint on your brush, you can do this twist and pull action with your fingertips. Notice how I'm holding it in my fingertips, and I can press it down into the paint, twist with my fingers, and pull while dragging it across the plate there. And now I have no globs. My brush has returned to its pointed tip, and I can paint with it like that. I'm just going to make sure it's wet enough. Because when you're painting with a small brush like this, because it doesn't hold very much water, you sometimes have to wet your brush a little bit more than you would with a big brush. It holds a lot of water. So let me just make this little decorative bumped piece up there, and this little cross. Now I'm only going to use the very, very, very tip of my brush, so I want to make sure that I have a clean tip. It's pointed, so I do that twist and pull to get a pointed tip, and I'm going to just draw a little line, only using the tip of my brush. I'm not pressing down very hard, or else I'll get a big fat line. Just press down a little bit, and notice I brace my pinky finger on the canvas here. That helps my hand to not be shaking when I'm trying to paint something really tiny like that. So I put my pinky finger down, brace it on the canvas in a spot that's dry, of course, and then I can be a little less shaky. There. That's fine. Okay, now let's move on to the tree. This is really fun because here you can be as shaky as you want. It's actually good to be extra shaky. So I'm going to make these roots that there's like spaces in between the rocks and the roots. Like this is a really old tree, and part of it has even like separated from the ground. The roots are up above the ground. You can see some space in between. So I'm going to make the roots like that. And remember that the base of the tree should be the widest part. You can even have extra roots going off the side like that. However you think it should look on yours. And then if you want to make it so that your hand does shake a little bit more, you can hold the brush way up here at the top, and then it's all very shaky and jagged and crooked, and that's the way the tree should be. Keep going back to get more paint whenever you need to. And I'm even twisting my brush on the canvas to make sure that I get all the paint off of it. Just rolling it in my fingertips like that to twist and distribute all the paint that's on my brush onto the canvas. Now here's where I'm going to split off. Actually, my tree looks a little bit too skinny. I'll just fatten it a little bit. There. I love how easy this is because your edges are supposed to be bumpy and jagged, and it's really quite fun to do. If you're finding, though, that you're not getting a sharp edge of your tree, that's because your brush is either too dry or it doesn't have enough paint on it. So go back and check if you need to make an adjustment. So now I'm just going to work my way out here as one of the branches comes out toward the moon, and I'm twisting in my brush in my fingertips to distribute all the paint as I go. And I'll make another split off here, another branch. Also keeping in mind as you go that your branches should become thinner as they get farther and farther away near the tips of the branches. They should be coming thinner and thinner. The way you do that is you reduce pressure, how much you're pushing onto the canvas with the brush. So as you start to lift the brush away from the canvas and just using the tip of the brush, like this, then you can get some really small lines like this. Just if you're using the very, very tip, not pressing at all. And then you can start to press as you get closer to the tree trunk, where the branch is supposed to be thicker. Another neat thing that you can do to increase the spookiness of your tree is to make these, like the tips of the branches, almost like claws, like they're kind of reaching down as if they're coming down and grabbing or reaching toward the gravestones like that. That makes for more of a spooky effect. I start out here like hands, like bony fingers. Now I want to mention also that it wouldn't be very realistic if the branches never crisscrossed each other. A lot of times if you're drawing a tree or something, we try to keep our branches separate and not touching one another, but that's not very realistic. So don't be afraid to have some branches that touch each other or are overlapping one another. That's perfectly natural. Probably makes it look more natural, actually. And don't forget to split off in this direction too, right off the canvas. Okay, it is really easy to get carried away with doing branches too. It gets really fun. And again, I guess I just have to tell myself to stop. That was so quick and easy. I don't really want it to be over. I hope you enjoyed doing this as much as I did. If you had a good time, if you know someone who might like videos like this, please share my page, patreon.com/Kristi. And I look forward to growing this Patreon community. I hope you join. Thanks for painting with me. I hope you have a really spooky, great Halloween. Bye.